People wonder if they can safely eat food past their best before dates. Now, the quality of these items often remains in high for months or even years, and it's also legal to sell them, provided, of course, the date remains fully intact. However, the National Consumer Commission, the NCC, is now cracking down on stores that specialize in these products, which are often sold at discounts of 40 to 50%. Well, let's explore now the controversy surrounding these raids and what it means for consumers as well as retailers by welcoming consumer journalist Miss Wendy Knowler. Wendy, happy Women's Weekend. Thank you so much for joining us. So let's talk about this. The NCC first noted in June that it would be embarking on these compliance inspections to ensure that unsafe or expired goods or goods that have actually passed their sell-by dates were actually removed off the shelves. But I mean, there's good and bad in this. We know that the current food basket in South Africa is very expensive due to the high cost of living. So a lot of families who were able to then buy their food through these cheaper means were actually able to stock food for longer. But on the other hand, we have a problem, a new phenomena where these foods could potentially end up in foreign-owned shops where their sell-by dates could potentially be removed, and that then poses a risk there. So what are some of your sentiments when it comes to these actions?
Okay. The most important thing here is that you need to draw a distinction between the different kinds of so-called expiry dates, right? Mm-hmm. And that the failure to do that is the problem. So you've used already in your introduction the words best before and the word sell-by. They're not the same thing. In fact, sell-by isn't in our current legislation. Sell-by is something that the retailers came up with to manage their stock. So it's sell-by the 14th of August, but obviously the consumer could still consume it safely for another 2-3 days if it's a perishable product like, dairy and meat. So the legislation, the food labeling legislation, has two very different kinds of expiry dates. They're called date marks. That's the actual word. Because food doesn't expire, meaning it's, let me start with use by means what it says. You must use this food, you must eat it by this date, after which there could be a safety issue. It could affect your health if you don't. So that's very cast in stone. You cannot sell those goods past their use by dates, end of. And I think the NCC is looking at those dates, and they've found rotten chicken and all the rest. And we need enforcement of that. We don't want our people to be buying those often in remote stores, in rural areas. That's wonderful enforcement, and I applaud that. The problem is when they start also removing foods that are shelf stable. They have a very long shelf life, right? We're talking rice, we're talking biscuits, we're talking pasta, canned goods. They are best before a certain date. They aren't rotten and toxic and dangerous the day after. That doesn't make sense. The deterioration is very slow, and it is actually legal to sell those goods past their best before date for that reason. And in many countries that happens. In Brazil, for example, the government actually steps in, has those foods tested to see that they're still all right, and then they may be sold at discounted prices. So we don't contribute to food waste, right, unnecessarily, which is a major global problem. Mm-hmm. And people who are food insecure get to have nutritious, tasty, still safe food at cheaper prices. So we need to differentiate. When you just talk about expiry date as if they're all the same, and you look at any date on any product, and after that you think, oh, this is rotten, this is going to kill people, make them sick, get rid of it. That's where the problem comes in. There needs to be nuance when it comes to expiry dates. And there's not, across the board, there's not too much nuance being applied, unfortunately.
Absolutely, Wendy. I mean, I know you are for this. And we know in South Africa, there's issues here. We've got retailers that actually donate some of the food that they have not been able to sell. So I think the issue here then, Wendy, is when and how does a normal citizen, a layman, then make that distinction from a food product that has either expired in that it's no longer consumable, and of course a food product that has reached its sell-by date but can also still be edible?
Okay, so again, we need to be careful about just putting all expiry dates in one hat. The short answer is, when it comes to a use by, follow that. Don't ignore it. Don't take chances. Use it by that date and don't consume it beyond that date, because it's a fresh product, it's a highly perishable product, and that is a food safety issue. It could very well make you sick, and yay for our authorities that are enforcing that and making sure that retailers don't sell that food. We're talking about shelf-stable food, your rices, your pastas, your biscuits, your canned foods, etc. Maize meal, which after it's best before, you just got to think about what that word means. Best before doesn't mean rotten the day after. It doesn't mean dangerous, will make you sick. You can use those products safely for quite a while afterwards. And most of these stores that are selling them will limit, they're not putting stuff up there that's got, that was best before 5 years before. It's just past its best before date. When it comes to canned foods, if the can's not dented, if it's not bloated, if it's intact, canned food is known, is famous all around the world for lasting, many, many, many decades in some cases, and still being fine. It's just to use some common sense and to understand that these shops selling foods beyond their best before dates, as long as they declare that, in my view, to the customers and explain what's going on, explain that that's why they're this amount cheaper, all good. So consumers can make an informed choice. If you don't want to take a chance, if you still feel uncomfortable because the date is the date and you don't want to, then fine. But retailers should be allowed to sell them as they are legally, and consumers should be allowed to buy them. You can't say they're bad quality the day after best before, because we have different grades of foods, right? We have choice grade, we have standard grade. It doesn't mean it's bad quality the day before. Does it make sense that a product is fine for 2 years on a shelf, and then the day after that it's not fine? It's nonsensical to demonize those foods, and it's not scientific either.
Thank you so much, Wendy, for that clarity. But I suppose the issue, I know we're out of time. I mean, some of those retailers that do, and it's quite actually a huge industry, this, where they actually sell these expired or off-the-shelf foods, they will not disclose to the public as to when and whether or not those foods are still safe. But Wendy, thank you so much for your contribution this afternoon. I wish we had more time. That is Miss Wendy Knowler there. She is a consumer journalist.